we're basically trying to show everybody that like you can build a world-class brand like Patagonia, where everything's made in Ukraine. Hey, you guys invaded and you left all this garbage behind, and we're gonna use that garbage to actually like fundraise and clean up all the disaster that you left behind. There's people in different governments actually who have messaged me wearing the F-16 t-shirts. I think that there's going to be more and more people that are interested in the culture of Ukraine, not just the war.
Hello world, my name is Tatiana Haiduk, this is KYIV Not Kiev, and before I'll introduce you my next guest, please make sure to subscribe to our channel.
Just before the war started, I started something called Saint Javelin.
We ran 100 stickers, there's like 1,500 being sold every day. It's crazy. All over the world, like Australia, New Zealand, Israel, Argentina, Brazil, like people are buying them from everywhere.
You helped us destroy tank.
A friend of mine said that he was at the airport and he was wearing this shirt and somebody just yelled, Saint Javelin!
I'm delighted to welcome Christian Borys, a founder of $1 million meme Saint Javelin, which is also a great example of socially oriented business and a dealer of the best English language content about Ukraine and internet. Christian, I'm very happy to see you in KYIV Not Kiev. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. I'm good. Thank you very much.
We are in business to rebuild Ukraine. That's the slogan you've chosen to yourselves. And let's talk a little bit about Saint Javelin as a business. How big is currently the team of Saint Javelin? And is this a mix of Canadians and Ukrainians, or it's more international composition?
We make product in Ukraine, we ship it to Canada, and then from Canada we ship to our customers across the United States and across Canada. And the reason why we have an office in Ukraine is so that we can manufacture products in Ukraine, have spaces to store it, and now we are going to use that space to ship products to customers in the EU as well.
Mm-hmm. So if a Ukrainian places an order, will the item come from Canada or directly from the production in Ukraine?
So now it comes from probably Lithuania or a factory in the Baltics. What we're trying to do, what we've been working like really hard on for the last 8-9 months, is to move all of our manufacturing to Ukraine. So all of our t-shirts, our hats, socks, all these different things. We've built up a really good network of suppliers, of manufacturers. We've spent a lot of time and effort and done a lot of research to like pick our own fabrics and to make our own designs and all that kind of stuff. And now we're in the midst of a huge push for our own production. And then so when in like that shirt you're wearing, for example, that was made in Ukraine. So that was a collaboration with Borys of Saint Javelin. And now going forward, ideally what we're trying to get to is that like anybody in Ukraine, when they order our product, it's made in Ukraine and it's shipped from our office with Nova Poshta. And then, for example, if you're in Germany or if you're in the UK or something like that, your product is made in Ukraine and it's shipped with Nova Poshta to your home in Berlin or whatever it might be.
That would be just great, because I wanted to have, this iconic Virgin Mary with the javelin, but then I realized that it will take me 3 to 4 weeks to get it from Canada. So you have a lot of fans in Ukraine that will be happy to wear your t-shirts. And I really like the idea that your products shipped worldwide are made in Ukraine labeled. So are you consciously aiming to promote Ukrainian products?
Yeah, 100%. That's like our whole goal is to move all of our manufacturing to Ukraine, all of our production, like all of our design. We're trying to source the best fabrics from around the world, from countries who share the same values. So for example, we've connected with a supplier in Finland that supplies a large very large amount of fabric to the Finnish military. So we're trying to use suppliers like that and bring that fabric from countries like Finland or from Portugal into Ukraine, and then use the world's best textiles, bring it to Ukraine, and then make our own versions, our own designs, like from scratch. The fit of the t-shirt, the fit of like the sweatpants, or the fit of the hoodies, and then be able to show the rest of the world that like we could make really, 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 really good products in Ukraine. Because a lot of people, they just expect their clothes to come from China. So we're basically trying to show everybody that like you can build a world-class brand like Patagonia, where everything's made in Ukraine as opposed to being made in China. So that's like the number one goal that we're trying to move towards now.
Mm-hmm. From which countries do you receive the biggest share of orders? It would be good to know, because it's kind of concentration statistics of Ukraine supporters around the world.
Yeah. The biggest is the USA for sure. We started in Canada, right? It all kind of started with like my friend network and stuff like that. So Canada's a big, it's not a huge portion of our orders, but it still makes up a significant portion. The UK is a really big supporter. Baltic countries, Poland, countries like Finland, I mentioned, Sweden, Germany, like the bulk of our orders come from the United States, Canada, and the EU. And, that's not surprising. But I think a lot of people have this idea that, for example, Germany, there's a lot of people who are like anti-Ukrainian or who don't support Ukraine. But in reality, like what we see is that actually there's a ton of people who support Ukraine, right?
In your opinion, what mostly drives your customers when buying something from Saint Javelin? The desire to support Ukraine in this way with a purchase, or just a desire to have a really cool item?
I think it's a mix of both, I guess. I think when it started, it was probably more of a desire to just support Ukraine and have this symbol, right? Because to me, that symbol, when people saw it, they saw the way to not just like donate money, but actually like show people around the world that they support Ukraine. Like it became kind of like a jersey. You go to watch your favorite football team or baseball team or whatever, and you wear a jersey. Like you support that team, you want everybody to know it, right? That's kind of what Saint Javelin became. It became like a jersey that people would wear to show that they supported Ukraine, right? And then as we started to create more and more designs, I think people just started to think like, oh, these are cool, right? Like I'd like to wear this crazy design, like a HIMARS shirt or something like that. And now what we're trying to do is to show people that like the products we make, it doesn't rely on some crazy design, right? It's just a really, really good t-shirt or like the best hoodie you've ever had, and it's made in Ukraine. So we're kind of trying to evolve continuously.
What do you think, what motivates foreigners to contribute in this way to Ukraine's victory?
I think that people, for the first time in a long time, they saw this as like such a good versus evil situation, right? Like it was so clear to people that Russia was invading a sovereign, innocent country with completely false pretenses and lying to everybody and doing it in such a brutal way. And we had seen the Russians do it in Chechnya, in Georgia, in Syria. And I think that like finally all those lies caught up to them, and people finally around the world said like, enough is enough, and we're going to support Ukraine as much as possible, because I think a lot of people could, they saw those images of people like making Molotov cocktails in Kyiv, and they saw, like a downtown city center, and people were preparing for, at that time it seemed like the end of the world, right? Like the views, the pictures that were coming out to the rest of the world, it seemed apocalyptic. So I think a lot of people were able to put themselves in the scenario of what people in across Ukraine were going through, and I think that's also what sparked a lot of people to like want to support Ukraine as much as possible, because they could picture themselves as like, you know, one day you're a teacher, the next day you join the territorial defense and you're ready to go to war, right? Because you have no other choice. So I think it was, I think it was just the ability to put yourself in that unbelievable scenario, basically.
So currently in Ukraine, one can also buy military trophies with donations. Charity organizations are super creative in what they are doing to raise more money for the armed forces. For example, my friends from Reactive Post, they do a clocks out of HIMARS rocket pod cover. I didn't know what a pod cover is, but it looks just great. And have you been considering to expand the product line on the reused military equipment or, I don't know, trophies?
And this is this was literally just coincidentally sitting in front of me. This is a Saint Javelin statue. So we've made, I don't know exactly how many of these we made, but these were made in Bucha by a Ukrainian sculptor who used debris from, like, they're made from Russian tanks. So it's basically like pieces of Russian tanks that he sculpted into something that looks like the Saint Javelin icon, right? That's something that the first time after the war started that I went to Ukraine, I went to Kiev in April, just after the Russians had left like akin and Bucha. And part of the reason that I went is because Saint Javelin was this big phenomenon at that point, and one of the number one things that people were asking about is exactly that. Like, can you, like, we want to donate, and like what we would like to get is a piece of this history, right? Like a piece of a Russian tank or whatever it might be, right? So like when I went originally, I was trying to gain the legal permission to do that. But at that point, nobody was thinking about that kind of stuff. Like, it was every ministry that we spoke to, it was like not on anybody's radar of how do you gain, like, who's gonna give you permission to export these kinds of materials and stuff like that. So finally, it's been, unfortunately, the war has gone on for so long, and now, like, we have these items that are being sold around the world. Like, there's guys who have sold like thousands of those keychains that are from Russian aircraft and helicopters and stuff like that. So now we have these Saint Javelin statues. We have a whole bunch of other stuff like medallions and whatnot. And I think it's a really interesting thing to do. And it's honestly, it's a great way to troll the Russians as well, basically, right? Because it's like, hey, to me, it was always interesting because it was like, hey, you guys invaded and you left all this garbage behind, and we're gonna use that garbage to actually like fundraise and clean up all the disaster that you left behind, right? So people around the world are like super interested to have a piece of that, like you said. So it's just a really creative way to do it.
Yeah. Now I believe it's easier to do so because, of course, one cannot maybe export a piece of a Russian tank, for example. But if you're exporting a vase made of 152 millimeters shell casing, that's an absolutely different thing. So, that's interesting. I have a question from Ukrainian media called Speka. How long do you think the world's interest in Ukraine, items with patriotic Ukrainian symbol, and consequently in your brand will last?
I don't think it will ever go away. I don't think that, like, Sweden has IKEA, and Sweden had actually a few brands, like KYIV. Canada has this big company called Roots, which basically, like, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's like a very big Canadian brand that is known worldwide, and they make like hoodies and t-shirts and sweatpants, and it's kind of like an export of Canadian culture. America, of course, has the brands like American Eagle and like Abercrombie & Fitch and like all these brands that have kind of been known for Americana, right? I think that there's going to be more and more people that are interested in the culture of Ukraine, not just the war, but I think as people learn more about Ukraine, when the war finally ends, you'll see tons of people who want to go and visit Ukraine and learn about all these places that they only heard about or watched in videos online, right? So I think that the interest is only going to continue to go up, honestly. I think that there's so much to explore. Like, you know, most people in our audience have probably never heard of Kapopol. And for the first time, if they go, they'll realize that, like, oh, there's this whole other part of Ukraine that I've never even imagined, because all I have seen is pictures of war or whatever, right? Or like I've seen what Kyiv looks like from videos, and I've seen what, you know, unfortunately what like Bakhmut and Donbass look like, but I never even imagined that like you have this mountain called Kolebla, and it's this huge mountain that you can climb, and there's like snow at the top and stuff like that, right? So I think that there's so much, you know, Odessa, all these beautiful areas in Ukraine, and I think that there's so much that you can show the world and like build brands around, right? Like Vishanti have been beloved for such a long time, and that kind of pattern was already very famous in fashion, right? So I don't think it's going away. I think there will always be an audience that appreciates that.
Mm-hmm. So that's a culture appreciation, yeah?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. You recently dropped a collection with Ukrainian Railways. That's the t-shirt with the long sleeve I'm wearing. Can you announce maybe any future collaborations with Ukrainians?
So we are doing, so last year when Ukraine first hit Crimea, the Russian air base in Crimea, everybody was extremely excited, right?
Oh yeah.
Because it meant that the Russians weren't safe in Crimea. And what happened with the Saint Javelin team is that when that happened, everybody in our team was extremely excited, and we kind of made this joke about having a party in Crimea.
Crimea beach party.
So then, like within a minute, we just came up with this thing called Crimea Beach Party. And I asked one of our designers, can you come up with a fake poster that looks like a Coachella concert poster, and like put Boris Johnson, put Zelensky, and do it like on the Odessa beach. And then we did that, and the response is so crazy. So in July, we will launch the Crimea Beach Party collection. So it's going to be everything in that collection will be made in Ukraine except for these bathing suits, which unfortunately we just didn't have time to do it in Ukraine. But everything will be made in Ukraine, and it's been like a huge effort on our part for like the last 8 months to work on this. It's not a collaboration, but we're working with a lot of Ukrainian artists and manufacturers and stuff like that in order to make it a reality. So that's a big one.
Mm-hmm. It came to my mind that we could make a wonderful KYIV Not Kiev t-shirts, for example, that would bear not only a linguistical but also a historical justice to the name of Ukrainian capital.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So I have another question from Specca Media. Who is the most recent saint you've added to your saints collection, and how do you decide which one to pick? Can we expect Our Lady counteroffensive next?
That's a good idea. That's actually terrific. It's a really good idea. The most recent one that we're watching, it should be submitted today, is Saint Star Streak. So we haven't made saints in quite a while. The way, like Saint Javelin, Saint Javelin is starting with this iconic symbol, right? And then the way all of this developed is that our audience started to ask for a saint that represents their country and their contribution to the war effort, right? So first it was the UK. All these people messaged us and they said, can you make Saint Enlaw? So that was the second one. And then it was like Saint Stinger and Saint Panzerfaustus for the Germans, and then all these other countries basically just started asking for their own, and we just kept on trying to make new ones for as many requests as we got. And secondly, HIMARS was a very big one because we knew that HIMARS was going to Ukraine, and we knew, just like our team understood what it would mean. So we started working on that before the impact of HIMARS was ever really known. And then once it actually did come out, and all these memes about like HIMARS o'clock and stuff like that, when that started happening, our team we already had the design and the products. So people kind of they really liked that one.
Is it a good time to start with producing Saint F-16, anticipating the game?
we have an F-16 one, yeah. There's people in different governments actually who have messaged me wearing the F-16 T-shirt. So there's like a big movement for people who want Ukraine to get like the best possible jets, not just jets, but equipment in general. And we have the F-16 one. We have the Bradleys for the infantry fighting vehicle, the Bradley. We have this vintage collection of designs they're not a saint, but they're a cool image of one of those pieces of equipment. So there's a lot of things on our site now.
The last question in the business segment of this conversation. What amount can you proudly mention as being already donated to Ukrainians from Saint Javelin?
So it's around $2.5 million now, US. It's like a mix of what we've sold and then campaigns, like crowdfunding campaigns and stuff like that. But generally speaking, like our contribution has been basically about $2.5 million US.
Thank you for that.
It's pretty crazy.
I want to specifically discuss also Saint Javelin's social media, because for me it's some kind of an art of talking about the war in a systematic, clear, accessible and humorous way.
It all started with my little invasion I attempted back in February 2022. Seemed like a good idea at the time. I mean, they were major underdogs, right?
And to help me to build this segment, I have a company of Ukrainian female stand-up comedians who contributed a couple of questions to you. So, Anna Kochegura asks, how it happened that Ukrainians turned jokes into a symbol of resistance, and what role do memes play in information war?
I think that Ukraine, I was a journalist, right? So I lived in Ukraine from 2015 to 2018. I worked at Kamatsky, I worked with BBC, I worked with Vice. I saw this amazing meme culture in Ukraine, because Ukrainians have a darker sense of humor that I think a lot of people find appealing, because it's darker than the sense of humor that they're used to, right? North Americans are generally speaking more reserved, I guess. They're not as blunt. So I think the memes that come out of Ukraine are funnier for that reason, because they're more direct, they're more blunt. And I think I've spent a lot of time thinking about like how this all happened. I think what happened is that when people saw soldiers making videos from the trenches, and not just from the trenches, but like in the cities, and when they were fighting off the Russians, and when they saw that these soldiers were making videos and laughing at the Russians, I think that it like let people breathe and let them also participate in that. So they basically started to do it themselves online. Like we had been doing that before the war started, because as a former journalist, like I spent a lot of time in the war, and I understood that soldiers have this dark repute, right? And they show it on the battlefield. But for average people, it's very hard for average people to understand that you can make those kinds of jokes in such a horrible situation, right? But it happens with any kind of like traumatic situation. So police, paramedics, they tend to have like a darker sense of humor. So I think that when people around the world saw that, we as Saint Javelin were trolling the Russian military for being such a, for being defeated in Kharkiv and Sumy, in Kiev, and having so many jets shot down and stuff like that. And when we saw all these Ukrainian soldiers and all these like foreign volunteers who were making videos and like adding their own humor to it, I think a lot of people just wanted to be part of it. And it became kind of like, it's a weird analogy, but it became kind of like cheering on your favorite sports team. And you wanted to just participate in the community of it as much as you could, right? And then it just started to evolve, and it's like it's a good release mechanism too, right? Because if like making jokes, it's kind of a way for you to get through everything that's so horrible, right? There was a really good interview with Nastya Stanikov from Krematsky, and she was in Bakhmut, and she was at a frontline hospital in Bakhmut, and she asked one of the doctors, an artillery shell hit near the hospital in this video that she was doing a report, and he made a joke about it, and she asked him like, how can you make a joke in this situation, right? And he said, what the hell, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, that's the only way you could get through this kind of time, right? You like laugh your way through it. So I think that's what a lot of people did. It's so shocking that you just turn to humor to cope with it.
I have another question from Nastya Zukhvala, also a stand-up comedian, and she actually asks about black humor, dark humor. How does the Western audience perceive dark humor about the war, and what should be taken into account when communicating with people who have no experience of living in a wartime?
It's a really good question. I think that a lot of people can never understand this humor because it's too dark for them, because they've never had to experience the kind of trauma that Ukrainians are going through, right? Like they can't even imagine. It's not in the realm of possibilities of things that they could ever understand. So for those people, they'll never understand how you joke about war. And I think that what we do, we made a lot of mistakes with our jokes and with our humor along the way. And what we learned, we set standards on things that were appropriate and inappropriate. For example, including kids in memes or in jokes is, to me, it's a no-go zone, because there was like these memes about how Russian children turn into llamas and stuff like that, and to me it's like kids, they're too young to understand what's going on. And even if you see these videos of like Russian children who are assembling AK-47s in school and stuff like that, like they don't know what they're doing, right? They're being brainwashed into an activity that they have no idea what the repercussions are and stuff like that. So for me, including kids in the jokes was just always off limits. And I think that you have to be aware of those kinds of things if you're trying to speak to a Western audience, because Ukrainians are, and anybody who has been involved in this war, people are so angry, right? And if you like, sometimes I see jokes and memes that reflect that anger in a way where it's so extreme that you'll never be able to speak to a wider audience with that meme or that joke, because most people just will never understand it or appreciate it or respect it, because like it's too much for them, right? So you kind of have to find this balance, which probably only happens because you've done it every day for a long time and you understand like what people accept as a joke and what people think is too much. But the thing that I always tell people, if they say, oh, that's too far, like, they also can't ever understand what you guys have gone through, right? So for them to say that's too far, it's also kind of, is disrespectful, because it's coming at it from like a privileged position where you've never experienced what that person who's making the joke has experienced, right? So, but, you know, if you want to speak to a broader audience about what's happening in Ukraine and engage them and you know, keep them interested, you have to find that balance for sure.
Mm-hmm. How has your audience changed over the last year?
I think that's a good question too. I think you find out that you have a core audience of people who are extremely invested in what's happening, and those people every day they want to like, they wake up, they go to Twitter, they go to Instagram or whatever, and they read the news, right? I've also realized that there's people who, for whatever reason, maybe because it's too traumatic, maybe because they got exhausted, maybe because life circumstances changed, their engagement and their interest just declined steadily, right? I don't see them posting anymore. Our audience, it still grows, but it's much slower, like much slower. So I think that the people who care are still there. Millions of people still care, right? But I think that, as happens with any major event, any news story, anything like that, like after a while, people just go back to their regular lives, right? They have to care about, you know, things that are happening at home or whatever. So all you can really do is continue to do the work and like focus on that core audience of people. And once in a while, when there's a big event, you'll get a broader reach. But yeah, I've just realized that you know, the people who care will never go away. But it is certainly harder to gain a broader audience at this point. And the weird part that's happened quite recently, I guess, is that you have you know, Elon Musk and like the Donald Trump fans and stuff like that who are putting out this narrative of Ukraine has received too much support and all this kind of stuff. So that's a weird new thing that's been happening. The right wing from across the world, not just the U.S. but European countries as well, which you have to fight back against that as well.
TV and radio presenter Yaroslava Kravchenko asks, have you faced accusations of sacrilege? After all, the list of saints is exhaustive. And on the contrary, have you received donations from religious organizations?
No. I don't think. Actually, no. So it's okay. So first of all, like, we're a business. We're not a charity, so we don't collect donations, right? Like we sell products and then we donate them.
Yeah.
But I remember that somebody told me that they bought their priest a Saint Javelin shirt, and their priest was like super happy about it.
What a good story.
Yeah. And then I think we made a joke where I think we put a Saint Javelin shirt on the Pope or something like that, and we put that image on Twitter, and it went like pretty viral. But most religious organizations aren't like, they're not willing to go anywhere near us because for sure we have faced accusations of being sacrilegious. Like a lot of people at the beginnings that this is sacrilegious, this is offensive, stuff like that. When we did the mural in Kiev, the next day, the church set somebody up to paint over the halo, and that was never fixed. So that's still it. Yeah, they painted over the halo, and it's been that way since. So yeah, we've certainly experienced that. And the only thing I can say is the World War I Museum in the United States, which is in Kansas City. They did an excellent article about Saint Javelin and the phenomenon of religious icons during war. So they actually showed that Saint Javelin is basically just an evolution of something that has been happening for hundreds of thousands of years, where you have religious figures who they're every European city that you go to has a religious figure who's like holding a spear or holding a sword or something like that, right? So these icons have always been looked up to by soldiers and civilians as like a symbol of support. The crazy part about Saint Javelin is that nobody has done it with modern weapons, right? Like nobody has shown a saint holding a rocket launcher. And that's why when people look at Saint Javelin, they think, oh my God, crazy sacrilegious. Like it doesn't come from a place of trying to be offensive and trying to be like anti-church. It was never about that.
Mm-hmm. Can you name top 3 best Ukraine-related memes after the invasion? I know that's a hard one.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Probably the day that you sunk the Moskva. It was like one of the most iconic days, I would say. You had these memes where it's like Moskva goes from has been promoted to submarine and stuff like that. I remember, I can't remember the guy's name. His first name is Yuri. He's a Ukrainian soldier, and he was wounded a few months ago, and I think he's receiving rehabilitation in
Гудименко.
Yes.
Гудименко. Yuri
Yeah.
Гудименко.
Yeah.
Wow. I know him so well.
Привіт, котики.
He had the video where he was basically saying like, how do you like our Bayraktars, right? That video at night, and that one always stuck out to me because it was I think it was in the first 2 or 3 days of the war, and it was such a courageous thing to do because everybody around the world at that time thought that Ukraine had no chance against the second biggest military in the world. And here's this guy who's basically saying, you think we have no chance? You guys have no chance, right? So I thought it wasn't a meme, but it was a moment that I thought was spectacular. And then I think that the woman who gave the soldier sunflowers and said, put these in your pocket.
Ребята, положите в карманы семечки. Я поняла, положите семечки или семена цветов. Вы здесь семенами ляжете.
Like that one, I think that one really, really, really struck a chord with people around the world because it was it really proved to people that this narrative that the Russians had of Ukrainians, they want us to save them. It was all bullshit, right? Because you see this old babushka who just puts sunflowers in this guy's pocket and tells him basically go die because at least you'll be more useful with sunflowers in your pocket, right? I think those moments were really, really fascinating and honestly like really instrumental for motivations and morale.
Who would you dream of seeing in Saint Javelin t-shirt? If this person is in Ukraine, I will make sure he or she will get this.
Well, the one person who has a shirt but never wore it was the president. So good luck with that one. Yeah, that I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't know, like we made a fake picture with Biden. When Biden came to Kiev, we made a fake picture of Biden in front of the mural, giving like a thumbs up, holding ice cream in a Saint Javelin shirt, and that one went like crazy viral to the point where actual American journalists thought it was real. Yeah, like NBC News tweeted it and said like, "Oh my God, we went to visit the Saint Javelin mural." So honestly, I don't even know who I would want wearing it at this point. It's almost funnier that we could just pretend somebody is wearing it and then see if people believe it or not.
If you don't mind, I will give the Saint Javelin t-shirt to Yuri Gudymenko.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be great.
And I will say that's from you. We're a good acquaintance.
Thank you. Yeah.
So now the Instagram story feed or a Twitter feed for Ukrainians look like the memes of dead orcs, memes, calls to donate, I don't know, the sad news about another fallen hero, then cats, then somebody children, then memes again. So as you can see, the emotional backdrop we are now living in is highly unstable. And I've seen the research of medical professionals who believe that up to 30% of Ukrainians will face the mental health issues because of the war and its consequences. And this leads me to a question. What awaits Saint Javelin after inevitable Ukrainian victory? Do you have any thoughts of where would you like to direct the efforts of your social business? Reconstruction, mental health care, cultural appreciation, as you told me. What are the plans?
Yeah, actually, you asked about collaborations earlier. So when I was in Kyiv in December, I met with the guys from One Love Coffee because we want to do coffee, and our idea for the coffee was actually to do a collaboration with One Love. We would basically take their coffee, package it as Saint Javelin coffee, sell it to our customers around the world, partner with Patagonia, and donate. We would donate money from the sale of the coffee to Patagonia, and then One Love would donate coffee to Patagonia. So it would be like this cycle. And then we wanted to use portions of that money to fund like rehabilitation programs, like PTSD rehabilitation. Because the one thing my experience as a journalist, and like a big part of the reason why I started Saint Javelin is because I spent time at these retreats and camps in Karpaty in the summer when I worked there with soldiers, and like I climbed Poverlo with a group of soldiers who were doing a PTSD rehabilitation program, and I spent time with the mothers and the wives and the children of soldiers who had been killed since 2014. And that really stuck with me because it showed me that after all of the violence that people see on the news and stuff like that, then you have a huge reconstruction, not just like physical reconstruction of buildings, but also like mental reconstruction, right? That people have to be given a new purpose in life, and families have to be like rebuilt and reconnected, and grief has to be dealt with in some way. So I think that what we're going to try to do, when we say rebuilding, I don't just mean like rebuilding reconstruction. I don't just mean like trying to, fix a kindergarten or something like that. I mean, like, can we participate in like rebuilding the economy by manufacturing in Ukraine? Can we participate in like rebuilding like mental health by helping to contribute to different programs. Like there's a thing called Veterans Hub in Ukraine. I would like to do something with them, perhaps. I know there's a ton of different initiatives for that, but the primary focus right now is like win the war, right? And then you can focus on all these things that will start to happen after that.
Mm-hmm. Christian, thank you very much for this conversation. I enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot for having me.
These were Tatiana Haiduk, Christian Borys of Saint Javelin, and KYIV Not Kiev. Stay safe, stay kind, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and see you soon.